to continue our cooperation. Okay. Now Mr. David is welcome. David GOTSIRIDZE says that we need 5 minutes more so that our other participants also might be able to join us.
Yeah,
Okay?
we are not in a rush. We can wait and we can see if there is something that can be done. You know, Professor Maria da Graça from Porto, Portugal. She entered the room on Tuesday when we had our rehearsal, and she could not enter she could not speak or be seen. And then someone from her university helped her to fix. Yeah, it was in her computer that was not allowing her to enter. There was some settings that had to be changed. I don't know. Maybe someone who, some technician might help to set the computer so it allows you to enter the room. I really don't know.
Yeah, I see there are some, they need some person who is familiar with this kind of things.
Yes.
Technique.
Yeah.
I had the problem, as I guessed, that I had already last year downloaded Team program, but it again demanded from me some processes and to download the new one. Maybe because I haven't used it for the whole year and they dismissed me. Maybe I don't.
Yeah.
As you know, we all are having online lessons now. Mr. David, Professor David GOTSIRIDZE and we represent POLESE State University. Monica Beatrice Ziegler was at our university. She attended the last Congress together with Leonor, of course. And the thing is that we now are having online all our lessons, and we use Zoom
Hmm.
to communicate with our students. Yeah, so this portal is a kind of new, not new, but we use only if we have to communicate it for our congresses or conferences or this kind of events usually. So it is not frequently used by us.
Mm.
Maybe
Yeah.
that's yeah, one of the problems, that we are not too familiar to this kind of portal, I would say.
Yeah, each one has little differences, and then you get a little bit confused every time you start using one of them. Yeah, I agree. I keep looking for where are the buttons, where are the little things. Leonor, we will wait a little bit, Leonor, so that we yeah, yeah, lots of people familiar with Zoom.
Sorry, my internet is awful.
Mm.
It felt yesterday 5 times sequentially. Today it began also falling. It fell 3 times. So this was the problem why I was not here because my daughter was trying to fetch it in a better way so it will
Professor
not fall
Leonor,
in.
what happens is that on Saturdays people are watching movies, streaming movies online, so that's why the internet gets a little bit heavy.
But anyway, I am so happy about the success of this Congress. You cannot imagine. It is 3 years from 2019 that I am working to have this Congress done. You see, and so 3 years working without rest to get is done. But finally, I think that we did it. And thank you for everybody who helped us. Uh, Again, the new boards, they were of so much help. They worked so well. And I don't see Maya. Maya is there also.
Yeah.
Rosângela, Marcos Maia, Angela Maria Vieira, they worked, and Douglas is also here. He showed. And so we could have it done with the help of all of you. Thank you.
Leonor.
Leonor,
Yes,
you've
Angela.
done a superb work, and I think our team worked very well together. So this was a very happy occasion for us all. And I am very, very happy, Leonor, that you could, at this stage, gather so much energy to put into this work, into this event. And I mean, I have a long-standing relationship with you, and I can see how much effort you put in this Congress. And I am nothing, but I am entirely full of admiration for your efforts.
Thank you.
Leonor, we were
also would
having
like-
excuse me. Yes. Natela, you can speak.
Can you speak? Okay.
Yeah, I would, dear Leonor, I also would like to join Angela's best wishes. And you were away in the other room when I already said that I'm happy to see you again, and once more to congratulate you on your birthday and wish all the best. And I'm also happy, and I hope that we'll cooperate for many, many long years ahead. Okay. Right now, as I see that our colleagues from Tbilisi are having some technical problems still, David GOTSIRIDZE, Professor David GOTSIRIDZE will start and will lead the round table. Okay, please, Mr. David.
Professor, your microphone is closed. You have just to click in the red button, and then is gonna become green, hopefully. And then we'll be able to listen you.
Professor David, nice to meet you. I am very glad to see you. You must open your microphone. Okay.
I think they are having problems to open. Oh, good. That's
Good.
it. Perfect. Nice. Very nice. I was trying to see if I could unmute your microphone from here, but I can't. I can only mute people. I cannot unmute. Sorry.
Thank you very much. Dear colleagues, I'm glad that in the conditions of difficult pandemic situation, we had the opportunity to hold our scientific forum. The object of our roundtable discussion is the literary text and the problems of its psycholinguistic interpretations. Informational revolution caused inconvertible growth of the information capacity, which became the problem of the century as the processing rate is and the processing rate is too low. Corpus approach became the profitable approach of the informational bulk processing, which made limitless language material processing possible. Despite little time, Georgian corpusology measurably succeeded. One of the important directions in this in creating parallel corpora, which theoretical prerequisites has been created in Tbilisi State University. Unfortunately, empirical material based on what this approach has been formed does not allow to generalize because it's non-homogeneous genre-wise. On the other hand, the translations done by a translator, whatever professional they are, do not exclude the alternate version possibilities. Translation corpora represents one more up-to-date trend, which has some heuristic potential, and it should not be excluded from the research area. Our interest toward the problem of parallel corpuses arose from the following factors. Globalization processes has completely changed the modern world, which made the fundamental issues, ethnocultural identity, relationship of traditional systems, values, and the new reality. Countries' relationship format is the global cultural informational area, become questionable. Georgians' entry into the global cultural informational space with an independent status has significantly changed the contact field of the country and requested a new intercultural communication model. Today, when the aspiration of Georgia is of a great importance to involve organically in the international community systems and to prepare the ground for a novel presentation of its own culture, the issue of the society informational provision becomes acute, which is considerably hampered by the existence of the linguistic and cultural barriers. Translations, so-called meshing program, errors make us consider about the one-sided technical or only humanitarian qualification of the authors and indicates to the necessity for a more complex approach. The most important factor is characterizing any culture in the cultural interactive field, which contains important information about the contacts of this or that nation is spiritual life, values and customs. The significant research resource in this regard is the translation field, which represents a peculiar empirical basis, with which we can inquire the intercultural communication facts and see how the conceptions and stereotypes about other cultures were formed. The study of trends defining scientific development has clearly demonstrated the priority of the interdisciplinary research and the inevitable and convertible character of interfield migration of the ideas. All the great discoveries of the 20th century has been made at the crossroads of the sciences. Norbert Wiener. Highly promising in this regard are interdisciplinary researches, synthesis of humanitarian and technical fields, which enable to unification of potentials of different cognition, sensory or rational sources. If we consider the fact that languages make heterogeneous segmentation of the world, which often becomes the reason of ethnic conflicts, then we have to reckon the research issue topical in the frames of intercultural communication. The close connection between language and the culture allows us to see the manifestation of the mentality of the nation in linguistic facts, which is extremely important for the novel presentation of Georgian culture in the global cultural informational space. In the previous project, we have limited the research area to Georgian translations of the European fiction of the 19th century, which was conditioned by the following. This is the period when of Georgia come back to the European cultural space. This period is distinguished by the exceptional productivity in the field of translation and by the diversity of translations from European languages. Fiction, prose, or drama in this period represents a driving force of the society conscious development and reflects the axiological priorities of the time and the lingual-mental world. The topicality of the research is conditioned by the following factors. Due to Georgia's entry to the world community with an independent status, the research of the smooth involvement of the Georgian culture in the global informational area, and on the other hand, the maintenance of its identity stands as an agenda. As a result of globalization of the information space, the transformation of the contact field of the cultures has made it extremely important process the principle of cultural interaction and use them in a specific social political environment. The novelty of research topic consists in the following. The translatological parallel corpora of the 19th century is considered in a unified conceptual paradigm for the first time as an empirical basis for the Georgian cultural consciousness research. The novelty is represented by the translogical confrontation of the research pairs of the parallel corpus. French Georgian, German Georgian, English Georgian, and Russian Georgian. These languages were in close cultural contacts in 19th century Georgia. The specific mechanism of translatological marking of the research parallel corpus is presented for the first time in relation to the Georgian material. The subcorpora of the transit translation of the research period is considered in the system wholeness for the first time. The novelty also is the structural organization of research corpus, which will enable us to reveal the intercultural interlinguistic asymmetry. Whilst the analysis of the parallel corpus pairs, a cluster approach is used. which reveals the interest of translations, sociology, psychology, ethno-linguistic teaching methods of the foreign languages, intercultural communication, linguistic, and etc. The practical material used in the research is based on the 19th century's French, German, Russian, and English prose texts translated into Georgian and consist of corresponding subcorporas. Corpora. Working on the project includes both linguistic and additional programming component, corpus technical assistance, and is related to the research goals and objectives, which for its part determine the methodology of the research. The main goal of the project is to develop the principles of corpora building and provide the technological support of its creating process, data collection, encoding, storage, annotation, and equip with meta information, provide text marking form, meta information, information presentation, and annotation mechanisms. Creation of translatogical corpora, which comprise of the 19th century fiction translations from European languages into Georgian. Taxonomization of text to be translated by languages with compilation and data transfer to electronic devices. Creation of the network structure of the 19th century Georgian translatological heritage, software of research, parallel texts, and reflections of linguistic and literary taste of discussed era, revealing, studying, and analyzing and digitizing Georgian artistic cultural contacts via the fiction corpus translated into Georgian during the research period. Using the parallel corpus as a research tool, identifying and interpreting textual and metatextual cultural information. Processing of the prosaic parallel text textual equalization principle on the basis of which information will be sorted. Processing of the dynamic equivalent system oriented to the Georgian language, relying on the corpora methodology, which will be the basis of the translation program and will be relevant for the various language pairs as well. In our projects, we include the professors Natela, MOSIASHVILI, English version, French version, GOTSIRIDZE, German version, Victor Sanikidze, and etc. We have some methods, for example, taxonomy method, which compiles a list of parallel texts, contrastive method, which serves for identifying the linguo-cultural specifics of the opposed pairs, dynamic equivalence method, which enables us to differentiate the equivalence of the regular and irregular translation, and etc. Now, I think it's it will be interesting for all persons who works in these directions. Thank you.
So what I wanted to add that we used, of course, the methods that Professor David GOTSIRIDZE has already mentioned about, but some other methods as well, like structural functional method that gave us possibility to comprehend the relations between the planned functions of expression of the original and adapted texts. comparative analysis that helped to reveal the relevance of the specifics of the opposing units, and method of dynamic equivalency facilitated the formation of the principles of using non-regular word correlations. The method of also cross-cultural analysis, enabling us to reveal ethno-national specific in the text understudy, which is of great importance in the process of assessment of overall results. Well, the establishment of the communicative linguistics gives the opportunity and capability to comprehend the semiotic nature of the adaptation from a new viewpoint. From the theoretical viewpoint, conditioned by the linguistic social pragmatics, lacunar phenomena, whose adapted equivalents are hard to find and tends to be a rather interesting theoretical problem. This all gave us opportunity to more deep and comprehensive study of these comparative, from the comparative point of view of these translation problems, which is a kind shows us also a kind of conflict of ethnic consciousness in the process of translation, and the methodology of assessment of adapted versions and so on, which is very important as readers of different nationalities should comprehend and evaluate the original texts properly. So all this also gives an opportunity for more and further and more deep studies in the field above mentioned. So it's the main ideas concerning our presentation, and as the rest of our members are not attending, unfortunately, due to some technical problems. Maybe some of you would like to put some questions, or maybe express your ideas and your maybe some kind of advices. We are You are welcome, and we are free to communicate. Please,
Natela, nice to meet you. I'll call Ethel because I think that she want to greet you also. But
okay.
it's quite interesting the work you are doing,
Mhm.
and I want to make some comments on Professor. Yes, here is Ethel. Do you see Ethel, Professor David
Yes,
GOTSIRIDZE
yes,
and
yes.
Natela Moshavili?
Really nice to see you. Missing you a lot. The wonderful time in Georgia, Monica, all of you. Really
Thank
missing.
you. Thank
Very,
you.
very
Thank
good
you
time. You
very
are
much too.
wonderful people. I will
You're
never,
welcome.
never, never forget the wonderful time we give to us. Lovely
We are
remembers.
also missing you, and we
Missing.
hope that we'll
Hope
have
to see
again
you soon.
opportunity to see you
Yes,
soon.
wonderful time.
Mhm.
I remember all if you ever have the opportunity to visit Tbilisi, Georgia, it's a wonderful and nice culture, and people are so warm, so wonderful. You must go there to visit. But anyway, in what I want to say is something
Yes.
that is quite important, and Professor David, at the beginning of his talk, there is a great defined problem in our contemporary world that you cannot reach, we cannot have an humanistic mind anymore. This is I think that is the worst problem, because knowledge is so fragmented in specialization that I think that we went to what Bertrand Russell has said. You know something about minimal things that we don't know anything. This is how, this is the world we reached. And I think that specifically, one of the fine problem is what Professor David also mentioned, is that the information load, it's so large that we cannot afford processing it. It is impossible to process it. And for instance, the lexical density of texts is so high that psycholinguistically processing it is almost impossible, because the load of new words, and not also the new words, old ones, but that have different meanings.
Right.
The problem is that there are a load of new semantic fields that we cannot reach them. And I think that this is one problem. Another problem that I think that you are showing in your research, but this is a well-known problem, but well, it's not so well known. It must be more investigated, is that cultures are losing their identity because if there is, they cannot preserve their identity if they don't have means to get to transmit to the new generations that accumulated culture. They are not transmitting to the new generations the past tradition. And so communities are losing their identity. I think that one of the ways of preserving is doing research as you are doing. This is what I wanted to say.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Leonor, very much.
I'm just going to give an example of Georgian culture as it has penetrated the Indo-European culture. Is your famous media. We know media not from the Georgian tradition, but from the adaptation of that lady in Greek theater and the old Greek theater. I've been working on the myth of Medea that has been used from that Greek base in, for instance, black culture in America. There is a famous black Medea who is an escaped slave woman who kills her own children when the slave owners are catching up on her. And she doesn't want them to be slaves, so she kills them. So she is known in America, in the USA, as a black media. And that Georgian culture. The point is that we don't know, or we have problems reaching the original Greek, Georgian culture. And I've tried to look for the myth. And I had a niece who was working for the European Community Youth Council in Georgia itself, and she couldn't find. We would like to, it would be interesting not only to provide you with European culture, it would be interesting to get more about Georgian culture and the old one. That is, Medea is several centuries before Christ, and she is a real character. She is not a figment of the imagination of a playwright in Greece. And she has been integrated in Greek mythology, which was very interesting to see that woman was supposed to be a horrible blah, blah, blah. And she was integrated in Greek mythology as some kind of a goddess or half goddess. And we cannot explain. We only have the Greek side of the story. We don't have the Georgian side, and that's a real problem. So, there must be things in your archives. The point is that there is a language barrier because your archives are in Georgian and they are not in a language we can understand. So, of course, we can learn Georgian, but it would be nice to not only you opening up to European culture, but you opening us to Georgian culture. That is a real exchange. And that's what I wanted to say. We are frustrated because Georgian is beyond. And it is not an Indo-European language. It's a Turkic language, a agglutinative language. So it's a difficult language for us, Indo-European. Of course, we can always learn a language, but we have so many languages to learn that, and that's a problem of translation. Translation is very difficult. But that's, what it would be interesting to get more of your Georgian culture, to be, it has to be brought to us, or we have to excavate your archives to get your culture, and that would be interesting to have it, because in our culture, European culture, you hold an important place. That we cannot measure, actually, because we get it through a filter, the Greek filter. Jason is very nice, but Jason is not Georgian. And Golden Fleece, that's the kind of things. What is it in Georgia? We only have the Greek version. That's what I want to say.
So thank you. Thank you very much for your request. And the first thing that I want to tell you that you are right. We have to offer our culture in English, in French, in German. We do translate some books by Georgian authors, and they are being translated. But of course, it's not enough, and maybe does not it does not encompass the areas you are interested in. For instance, when you speak about Medea and you say that you know only Greek version, you are right, because actually she is not Medea, she is Medea. So it means
Ahmed,
that
I see.
that
Inter-
it means that Greeks call her Medea, but actually her name is Medea.
How interesting.
From this name is coming term medicina.
Yeah. The term medicina is
And
professor.
Florentine Medicis are the forebears of Medea, as they used to say. For
And-
example, Cosimo Medici wrote about that he's Medea's grandchild.
So I guess we have to learn,
Interesting.
and that's exactly what will be interesting, to get that side of our culture, because it is our culture. But the
Also,
Georgian side, we don't know it.
There is one more proposal.
Natela,
Yes.
also the first Georgian king and the founder. I think that it's interesting to speak a little bit about that. And for me, it was a surprise, and including his name. Can you tell people something about that?
I think Mr. David will offer you the better version of it.
Promete. One person who also make influence on great cultural was mythological person Amirani. Amirani, from Amirani, the Greek culture took the Prometheus face.
And one more thing that I would have liked to add right now is that it's absolutely unknown for us which field, which part of our history you are more interested in. So there can be some mutual project. It can be established right now. Its roots can be It could be started right now, and then we can continue. As you can also tell us what are your demands, which part of our history is more interesting, and what should we start translating first? Because the material is so big, it's impossible to do everything simultaneously, you know? It's absolutely impossible, neither physically nor financially. So priorities should be put forward, and maybe your wishes will be taken into account, and even we can have a mutual project, as I have already mentioned, and to start working on some parts of history, maybe legends, maybe, or some other myths about Georgia, and some real, some unreal, that we can study, and we do some researches in this field, whether what is real and what is fiction, to find out.
Can I say a word about Professor David GOTSIRIDZE's talk? Very nice. Really brings lots of ideas, even brings new flavors to the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. I mean, Georgian is split ergative languages, such as many verb final, such as many indigenous languages in South America. And all these minoritized languages and cultures, now we should turn to them in terms of research and also in terms of establishing new possibilities for them to impact a world which has proven to be in a difficult direction nowadays because of the dominance of Indo-European cultures with the actor action kind of conceptual framing, nominative, accusative, and there's a lot of possibilities that research about these minoritized languages and cultures can bring at this point, at this infodemic world, in which many ideas which have not had the chance to be expressed and help us develop more empathy, transformative possibilities for the world. So I think Isapl has this chance. It's a beautiful conference we have had, and we have this chance to do something actually in a world which is not going a good direction. And I think you have touched in very delicate and subtle and interesting points, cultures flourishing, of possibilities such as the Georgian culture and the Georgian language might have something to say in a more dialogic world and really impacting our processes of research, of education mainly, and translation poses so many problems. It's not only a matter of lexical isomorphy, but there are cognitively many interesting fields to be explored beyond much of what linguistics and even psycholinguistics has done. So there is a beautiful agenda for future researchers, and this is something we should really stress and help develop. Thank you very much for your beautiful talk, Professor.
Thank you.
Well, and as Professor Jacques Coulardo has mentioned, Georgian language is very difficult, and people spend years and years learning it. Even not every Georgian can speak literally, let's say so. The language is very difficult, and it has a very difficult verb. As we in English say simply, I made it. For instance, I made it for you or for me or myself and so on. And in Georgia, this word will change the forms. So it's quite difficult language. So really, we have very rich and ancient history and culture, our music, our writings and so on, and it's really very interesting the rest of the world to assist to learn more about us. So really very interesting topic is raised right here and right now, to make more translations about the ancient periods of Georgian development.
Can I make a question? How is machine translation going on so far in your language? Is there any advance? Because if we look at, for example, Google Translator and things like that, among Portuguese and between Portuguese and English, for example, it has improved a lot in the last decades. So how is that working for you? Is there?
Rosangela,
Yes?
the Google translation of Portuguese into English is a shame.
But it has
But it's
improved a lot.
improving. It's
It's
improving.
improving.
It
It changed a lot last year.
It's
So
getting
if
much
you think
better
about
than
20 years ago and now, it is much, much better. Yeah.
Well, I can tell you that I agree with you. It has improved much and it's much better, but still it's not sufficient and it's not good. So, Google Translation can use a person who knows the both languages well to ease his or her work, you know. But for a person who doesn't know one of the languages well, it's absolutely impossible, because some things are left in the original languages that Google can't translate at all, or some extracts are mistranslated, I would say so. If we can coin a word like mistranslation at all.
The main problem is that there is no contrastive analysis, and it's not based on contrastive material, and it needs also associative material, because one concept in Georgian and in English, for example, ambitious in Western cultures is connect with positive marking. In Georgia, it's have negative, because it's the part of national mentality, and for example, Georgian mentality is connect with Orthodox system, and in Orthodox system, the person who wants to be perspective and who try to show his priority is a negative person, because he wants to show that he is better than other people.
Yeah.
And in dictionaries, we can't make difference between the meaning in the for example, original language and in the translation. And we can find the way using associative experiment, which shows that how this meaning is reflecting in one of the languages.
I agree with David, Mr. David, Professor David GOTSIRIDZE, and I want also to add that the ideas that are put in Georgian texts, for instance, between the lines, are absolutely neglected in those kind of translations, you see. So the soul of this masterpiece is left somewhere outside the text already.
If I can, I would like to just say something about Google Translate.
Yeah.
Google Translate works on big data, and it takes what has been translated from one language to the other, and in both directions, it makes a database, and then it works statistically on what it has in a database. And with Georgian, which is not a big language, the corpus is necessarily limited. So they don't have enough data to work with the method they are using. And second, the method itself should be questioned. And that's where the underground semantic meanings of the words and the sentences is not taken into account at all, because it only works on the surface. And it's amazing to see, since they have 10 cases of translating one word like that, and they have maybe one or two that are different, the one or two are going to be neglected. It's the majority that takes over. That's what they call democracy. But that's pure statistics. I mean, pure numbers. I mean, it doesn't. I mean, it doesn't capture the language. It captures the surface of it. And everyone knows that the surface, even Chomsky would say so, that the surface is only the surface. We have to go deep under. And that Google Translate is not able to do it. And not only with Georgian, I'm working systematically English and French. Translation of French into English and English into French is at times extremely defective with complete mistakes, mistranslations. That's Google Translate. I'm using DeepL at the present moment, DeepL, as a contrastive one. DeepL is limited in the number of languages it deals with, but it is a little bit more subtle. But I don't exactly know how they work. I would have to check, do some research on how they work. But I don't think they cover Georgian. They have a limited number of languages. That's the point. Whereas Mr. Google has hundreds, not quite hundreds, but a lot, many languages. But the method is not good. I mean, it has to be, well, it's one of the things I didn't say yesterday. We have to completely go away from traditional methods in that field, and we have to reanalyze language from a different linguistic point of view. It's the linguistic analysis that is behind, which is defective. And there we would enter a very provocative subject, because Chomsky's linguistics is not helping at all, by far. But that's another subject. But that's what I wanted to say. Translating machines for you, for small languages like Georgian, would not be very helpful, because their corpus is too small.
But Jacques, may I tell you something? One of the worst problems in their translation is a synthetic one, because they do not, language have different order, word order positions. And so this is one of the main problems in translating Portuguese into English, because our word order, for instance, adjectives in Portuguese goes after the noun, usually. If they go before, meaning changes. And in English, the order is the opposite. Even with noun, when nouns are in the adjective function, you see?
Yeah.
This is a synthetic problem that their program does not solve.
Yeah, it's the matter of order and also case marking systems, right? Translator in Google is basically on actor-action language and nominative-accusative languages. And then when you have the problem of conceptualizing argument structure in terms of, for example, ergativity, in which you don't have actor-action, but you have something that falls upon you. You don't conceptualize the structure and also the semantic structure in terms of someone doing something, but in terms of, things that fall upon you. So this implies different worldviews. That's why I think the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis is in order to be revisited, because then you have to encapsulate and compress a different conceptualization structure in terms of the dominant and these minoritized languages in terms of structure. It's not only a matter, of course, order is relevant, but I mean, the organization of the constituents of the, it's been Indo-European, I don't even Indo-Europeanized or something like that. And I think this is what has to be overcome, because this is deeper, but that's where the question lies, in my view. Thank you.
I want to add that in case of Georgian language, Google Translation, I think its attitude towards the language is a bit different, because in our materialistic century and era, Georgia is not a small language; it's a big one, but it's not widespread language, and it's not applied in many countries. Actually, in Georgia, and only Georgian communities speak in other languages, right? In general, this language. That's why it's not paid that much attention for, as the language is difficult and it's not widespread. It's maybe not worth for Google Translation, for Mr. Google, let's say so, to spend much time, energy, and finances on development of this field of its activity. Though it's much better than it used to be, as I have already mentioned, but that's not good enough to rely on it and to use as a basic translation means, even in technical translations as well. Because if you don't know the both languages well, I repeat it once more, and I want to clarify that very often, the words, as Professor GOTSIRIDZE has mentioned, that mean maybe, according to the dictionaries, the same in other languages, have some different values and loadings in Georgian, and that's why it's mistranslated into English or other languages. So, of course, the personal loading of translator is still very important. Of course, if you want a reliable translation, if you want a high quality translation, it should be done by a person.
But just to give you an example,
revised maybe. Yeah.
Just to give you an example, it's not only Georgian that is at stake. If you ask Mr. Google to translate a sentence like, I am speaking of intelligent men, places, and plots, it is going to translate in French, je vous parle d'hommes intelligents, and then the two others that are concerned by intelligent in English, intelligent coordination, the adjective covers the three nouns that follows. The two others are going to be excluded because in French, the adjective only concerns the one after which it is positioned. And even in our languages, you have mistakes like that. They don't understand the syntax, the discursive syntax of our languages.
The algorithm is biased. The algorithm is biased. That's the main thing, I think.
So one more example. The sentence systems is very different. Georgian minimal sentence in European languages consists of subject-object. Subject predicate. In Georgia, the minimal structure includes also objects. It's very specific, and it reflects the old period of language when we have complex words, which
exactly.
Then Georgia now keeps this old system. And we have also sentence.
Yeah.
And it's while translating, it's very difficult because you need to coordinate with the target language.
That's right. Yes, because this is the main point, I think, Professor. You have like Georgian has a structure which is, I mean, not exactly like, but many Amazonian languages are like this. SOV kind of language with the split ergative system. Now, if you want to look at these languages by means of the bias of nominative or accusative language, in which you have subject, predicate, actor, action, then no matter what you do with vocabulary, if the basic structure is biased, you're not going to do a good translation anyway. So these people at Google and people who works on this machine translation should know more linguistics, actually, because they should be sensitive. There's a lack of empathy. It's just trying to see, as people say, the word through your belly button, you know, look at the word through at your belly button, and this is some sort of linguistic imperialism, because you're never going to do a good job if you're not empathetic with different possibilities of organization of the events, and language does that in diverse way. So I think this is one of the main issues that we should address and keep trying to do critical mass on these aspects. And I'm happy that your talk has, you know, made it possible for us to think about this, because this has to be said, this has to be written, this has to be taught, because you're never going to get anywhere if you start from a biased structural, deep structure biased kind of algorithm. And the algorithm is just an algorithm. Someone has built it that way, having in mind conceptual structures, which cannot account for the diversity of languages in the planet. So that's the main problem. And Georgia is only a case. There are many other cases like this. Yeah, with the minority languages which are dying because of this.
But
Professor Leonor?
Yes, turning to the point that Professor Natela MOSIASHVILI.
Yes, MOSIASHVILI, right.
Spoke. I don't believe that literary texts can be translated by machine, because each writer, namely poets, poetry, for instance, machine can deal with what differentiates one author from the other, the stylistic differences, even at the significant level, because what the translator must do is choosing for equivalences in the language of reaching, and there is not a it is not a translation in a pure sense, it's creation, because he must choose the equivalences, the values that should be the same as what the author, original author, wanted to reach. In this case, it's a case of values. For instance, translating the French Verlaine, for instance, if you are going to translate Verlaine, you must choose the musical effects. This is creation. I always say that if somebody would like to translate poetry, he must be a poet also.
Yeah.
So I don't think that machine will ever. Do you agree with this, Jacques?
Absolutely agree. Absolutely.
I'm going to give you an example I worked on quite often. It's Sonnet 21 by Shakespeare. Try to ask any machine to translate Sonnet 21 by Shakespeare. Only the words. I mean, you know, the surface, even there they make mistakes because they don't understand the structure, the mental structure that is behind that kind of language. And then if we speak of poetry, we have a music, you have a tempo that is untranslatable by definition. I translated some 9th century Sri Lankan poems, yes, graffitis from Sigiriya. I translated them into English and into French. The poetry of that culture, Sinhala is a language, 9th century is a long time ago, is very characteristic of that culture and has no correspondence in French or in English. If you translate in French, it's a little bit better or easier because Sinhala is a syllabic poetry. You count the syllables to get the meters. In French, it's the same thing. But if you translate to English, which is a stressed language, where a meter, a foot, is not one syllable, but generally 2 syllables for iambs, for instance. It might even be 3 syllables for anapes and the others. How can you translate a syllabic poetry into a stressed iambic poetry? That's the kind of thing.
Yes. The equivalent, Jacques,
yes.
The equivalence I found, for instance, the metric is different for sure. And so the equivalence would be stress, contrasting stress instead of length of this syllable. This was an equivalence.
Yeah, but it's not
because music cannot be translated.
It is an equivalent, but it's not
music cannot be translated.
And there is another difficulty that Googles cannot take in. No machine can take it. It is what Mr. Saussure, he exists somewhere, spoke of. The meaning of a word is not only the meaning of a word, it is also has to be taken into account all the paradigmatic elements that are behind it and that are necessarily different from one culture to the other.
For sure.
And that you cannot find an equivalent. Full stop. And 2 languages, the paradigmatic connections of any word in 2 languages are going to be different. Even if it is car, even that simple car, if you go to French, it's voiture or auto. If you go to German, it's Wagen, and so on and so on. There are all the paradigmatic elements behind. The cultural paradigmatic elements are completely different. Completely different.
Not to say anything about connotational meanings of the
word. Exactly. And that is untranslatable. I was asking, when I was in Sri Lanka, I was
connotations are untranslatable.
I was asked by the Buddhists in Sri Lanka, the monks, we want to bring Buddhism to the world. in English, how can we do it? I say, it's very simple. You translate what are not the main concepts. You keep the Pali words for the main concepts, and you have notes or a lexicon explaining those words, because you cannot translate a word like dukkha, that to define it you need about 250 words. The definition is extremely complex. How can you translate it in English? That is not a Buddhist culture, as far as I know, and there is no equivalent. So they translated it, they mistranslated it traditionally by suffering, and dukkha is not suffering. Dukkha is the fundamental living element in the human being, and suffering is completely different. Our culture, and so that's what I told them. And I think, as far as I know, that they are following that kind of advice. Keep your concepts and explain them, but don't translate them, because they're untranslatable.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. I think there are degrees of translatability, but as the semanticist from Canada, Liza Matthewson, says in a very interesting article, there is affability, there are gray areas, and of course, verbal art is probably the most challenging horizon. That's true. Cultures and languages, they have their own peculiarities, but also shouldn't forget the universal dimensions. In this sense, I was lucky enough to hear Joseph Greenberg talk in Stanford once about this, and I think these are perfectly compatible. I mean, we should not be completely analogical, but we cannot be anomalous. Just to remind from the old philosophers of the old antiquity, which say analogists and anomalies. So we have the beauty is exactly in trying to reconcile and advance from these challenges. So Joseph Greenberg used to say languages and cultures are like people, that we all have something in common with all other people. We have something which is common just to groups of people, like the classifications. And of course, we have something that is not common to anyone, but it's idiosyncratic and individualized. So this is the correct framework, because we cannot also accept that they are not universals. They are universals, and they are compatible with classifications, and they are compatible with idiosyncrasies as well. So that we should get the middle path maybe, and say, well, this is challenging, and probably verbal art imposes the most challenges, but we can be creative, and maybe we can appreciate not only Shakespeare in Georgian culture or even in Amazonian cultures, but we should also be able to listen to ritual wailing in central Brazil, and that has many peculiarities, but this can be appreciated by all humankind, I believe.
Marcus,
so this is a challenge that we have to meet as linguists and
Marcus,
anthropologists.
since you're speaking of the Amazonian indigenous people, I'm thinking of Lévi-Strauss, and Lévi-Strauss worked on those people.
That's
And
right.
his first principle is that I use a translation into French in his case, because anyway, the language is not important. And you are saying exactly the reverse. For those Amazonian people, the stories, the myths, and so on, the language for them is essential, because it is oral, it is said, it is recited, and the rhythm, the music of the language is fundamental to the story.
Right, of course, I'm not saying against that. Of course, I've been working with Amazonian language for over 30 years. But you should remember that Lévi-Strauss also, influenced by Roman Jakobson, created the concept of mytheme, the phoneme. because there are commonalities. There are commonalities in the most diverse cultures. There are commonalities that can be explored, and the diversity is beauty. The diversity is beautiful, but also there are really commonalities as well that can make us all human beings, right? So that's what I think. Thank you for the opportunity.
And I would like to say something as well. I would like to thank you very much, Professor David and Professor Natela. I'm not going to try to say your surname, I'm sorry. Not being a linguist, I'm a psychologist, and I think this was a great opportunity. I mean, the talk of you both were very interesting, and it gave room for this wonderful discussion. And I would like to say I'm fascinated by the subject, and that I have learned a lot, and congratulations for the wonderful messages and for the wonderful discussion that your talk gave to us. Thank you
very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I have a question, Professor Jacques. You mentioned the alternative possibility for Google Translate. You said something under deep error. What's the name of the program? I don't know.
It's a program. You're going to find it on the internet very easily. It's spelled DEEPL. DEEPL.
DEEPL.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's a translating machine with a limited number of languages, essentially mainstream languages, the French, English, German, and so on. But there seem to be, I don't know their method, but I haven't explored it. They seem to be more accurate in understanding some subtleties of the language.
Okay.
And whereas Google Translate is subtlety is not. It's motto.
Okay. Thank you. Another good information from this table.
But the best way is to try it with languages that you know, and you compare Google Translate and DeepL. At the same time, Google Translate has some advantages. Its corpus, let's say, is so big that for some very technical words, it has better efficiency than DeepL because their corpora seems to be more limited in the very sharp technical fields like medical language, psychological language, and so on. But then people have to try the translating machines and compare the results.
Very good.
That's the best way.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, I asked the question about the translation machine because I have a student who is working on this. So I was very curious about that, and this information is also useful for me, Professor Jack. I didn't know this machine translation deeply, and we will check it. Very nice.
But check the book I've published at Kindle. You know, Kindle shop, Kindle stores in Amazon. It's a Kindle book, and it is on translating. And I gave examples. It's a long book. It's 200 or 300 pages, and was done for a colloquium somewhere in Romania, I think. You get examples and deeper explanations about how it works and how it should work, because we have to propose something.
Of course.
It's not enough to say that it's bad. Now, how can they improve? I think that Google Translate cannot improve really because they have to go back to the beginnings, back to the main principles, to the basics, because they are wrong. They have to completely change the method of working. DeepL, I don't know, but they seem to be a little bit better. But what do we propose? How can we imagine a translating machine. And I think the main problem is that informatics and, unluckily, Indo-European linguistics, dominant Indo-European linguistics, is binary. Binary. It's one and one. It's one and one. It's subject and predicate. Absurd. Go to Sumerian, and Sumerian is not. First, it's a negative language, and second, it cannot be reduced to one and one, because a negative language doesn't work like that. It works differently. There is a one, an in between, and a second. The agent is secondary. As Marcus said, things are coming onto you. So you have to have three elements, and I think that that's the problem with our linguistics, Indo-European linguistics, and with those translating machines. They are binary, and they cannot see that subtlety comes when you leave the binary field and enter a ternary or even eventually a quaternary field. But do we have a linguistic that is ternary? Yes, we do, but it's not the mainstream one. Certainly not Chomsky. Chomsky is definitely not ternary.
Chomsky has never been the mainstream, actually. Never has been. This is a mistake spread out by people like Everett who wanted to become famous. Never been. And he has always done firm standing for the importance of universals, but he has never said that diversity shouldn't be contemplated.
Well, the point is that Chomsky stopped being a linguist at a certain time. His career stopped, and it would have been interesting that he had stayed in the field when all his disciples took over when he retired from the linguistic field. And
that's unfair. That's not true, and that's unfair. But let's not go on this discussion.
The interesting direction is the typology of mistakes. We can find texts in corpora, and there is special department of lingual mistakes, and it's interesting way to make generalization of these mistakes, and it's may help the Google professors to make their translation better. They need the sources for generalizing, and after this generalizing, they can make their programs better. It's perspective way, because corpora reflects not language, but language. It's a period of study language, not language and parole.
On behalf of Mr. David and me, I would like to thank you all for listening us, for sharing our ideas, and this very fruitful and interesting discussion. Thank you very much.
I am joined.
Thank you, Professor Natela and Professor David. We are really sorry that your colleagues could not join us. I think it's very frustrating if we have, prepared to to give a talk, to deliver a talk, and we cannot enter the room because of, you know, our machines don't obey us. So we are really sorry for that. We hope next time we can be together, and then we can, you know, listen. Maybe we can prepare in the program to have an opportunity to have your colleagues and your university and all the subjects you raised delivered in person, which I think is it will be very interesting. It's also, I think, extremely interesting for us because I'm speaking in a Brazilian point of view, that we have to know more other cultures. There are many languages that we don't know enough about, and cultures we don't know about enough. So I think it will be very, very interesting for us and for our students as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And,
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Caucasus is very interesting because in Northern Caucasus there are a lot of languages in a very small territory. And when you speak about poetry translations, there are languages with only one vowel. How to keep phonological structure of the text when you have only one vowel. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, according to the program, we have another 5 minutes before we start with the roundtable psycholinguistic study of polyglottery and its implication for language learning. It's Professor NIKULICHEVA.
Dina NIKULICHEVA. I'm here. I am glad to greet you all.
Good. And do your colleagues are also in the room? Dina, Elisa, Dina, yes, but Elisa, is Elisa in already? I'm just trying to find. I don't know. Maybe she entered the room with another name as well, so I'm not sure. So far, I can't see her.
Hello.
Elisa is there?
I can't see
Dina, can you see Elisa?
Surati Gadavilot. Açelö. Aha, Gad.
Is Grigory Kazakov there?
I can't see Grigory so far.
Oh my.
Yeah, and I'm also looking for Stefan.
Yes.
I'm here. Hello.
Oh, good, Stefan. Good, that's good. So maybe we could check if they, because we have another few minutes before.
Yes, I'll
time.
call Grigory and see if he is able to connect. Just a moment.
Professor Kulakov is there. Can you see him?
Yes. He said hello already.
Professor Kazakov, I don't see him.
Yeah, he's here. Just his camera is off.
And Elisa POLESE.
She's not in so far. I can't see her. But Professor Dina is calling them, so she's just making sure they are. Maybe it's just a time zone.
Sometimes there are technical problems.
Yes.
Their connection is not good or something else.
It happens. Just a moment.
Yeah, we can wait. You know, we are not. We are in. We have a. It's not a problem. Meanwhile, I will talk about an idea that has raised about our farewell ceremony. So because if we were together, we would probably have the chance to go for lunch or dinner together in different moments during the conference. So because we are not together in presentially, we thought we could have cheers at our farewell ceremony. So if someone wants to, you know, have a glass of something together close by the time of our farewell ceremony, which is going to be at 4:30 in Lisbon time, so you are invited to have something close.
Professor David GOTSIRIDZE, your nice wine. Do you know that Georgia has very good wine?
You see? We can have a moment of cultural beverage exchange. Professor Kazakov? Yes, good. I was trying to guess by, you know,
Great,
your name
I'm so
here.
glad to see you, Grigory.
Yes.
Do you know something about Elisa POLESE? Can you send her a swift mail and inquire if she's able to connect? Your microphone is off, Grigory. I can't hear you.
Well, I tried to get her email.
Dear colleagues,
Yes.
good afternoon. Yeah, I will send an email to Elisa POLESE. I hope she must have received all the releases from the conference, but I'll double check that and send her a reminder.
I will try to get her email. Just a minute.
Mm-hmm. But dear friends, we can start our meeting, and Elisa's report will be after mine, so she will have plenty of time to join us, if it is possible.
Of course.
Yes.
Shall we start? Can you hear me?
Very good.
Yes,
yes.
Good. Dear colleagues, I'm very glad to meet you all at our roundtable on psycholinguistic study of polyglottery and its application for language learning. I'm proud to introduce some of its participants. So Professor Elisa POLESE is an Italian polyglot, language learner, and researcher from the Research Center Jülich in Hamburg. Professor Grigory Kazakov, who is present here, polyglot and researcher of polyglot from Moscow State Institute of International Relations. And Stepan KULAKOV is his former student from Moscow Institute of Humanities. And me, Dina NIKULICHEVA, I'm professor in Scandinavian languages and a researcher of polyglottery from the Institute of Linguistics, Russian Academy of Sciences. My idea is this. I suggest that after our presentations, we reserve 20 minutes from 13:10 to 13:30 for the general roundtable discussion. So please save your questions till then. As we all know, among multiple books on the phenomenon of polyglottery, there are two main types of books. One type are books created by polyglots themselves about their own methods of learning languages, and another type is books written by researchers about polyglots. The example of the first type is the book that Elisa POLESE was going to speak about. It is her book, Multilingual Learning, How to Become Fluent in Multiple Languages, released in March 2019. And another type can be represented by a series of my own books on external study of linguistic and psychological strategies of polyglot. And now I'm going to share my presentation and how do I do it? I press the arrow.
There's a button down there, like looking like a square, like a screen to share screen.
Square to share screen.
You press it and then you select the window on your computer where your presentation is.
I see show the whole screen. Yes, and I select my presentation. Just a moment. Can you see my presentation?
Not yet, but is your presentation open?
Yes, it is open. It
should come. If you select the entire window.
And now, what about share?
Yeah, share a window.
Yes.
It's starting now.
Yes.
Yes, it's perfect. It's coming.
Coming?
Yeah.
The problem is that I can't see it.
You cannot see the presentation?
I cannot see my own presentation. Isn't that funny?
Yeah, for us, it's so far it's all black. So and only.
No. It must be blue. They say your screen is seen. Миш, помоги, пожалуйста. You're on the main screen. Stop the demonstration. Wow. Moment. Теперь ваш экран виден другим участникам. Остановить показ. No. So I opened. Is it the last arrow in the row, in the bar downstairs?
I think it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think it's the fifth one in my case, on my screen.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
After the hand, there's a hand symbol.
After the hand, yes. I pressed it, and what, Grigory?
Well, no, we can't see anything at the moment, can we?
So I can't either. The sixth arrow is start the show. Please, I need help.
Yes, if you start the show, so if you go to start present now or start, you click in the first option in your entire screen, yeah, and then you click in
entire screen, yes.
Okay.
So I see the entire screen, and what?
And then going to you just go for your presentation, and then it should be on our screen as well.
Yeah,
I open my presentation. Do you see it?
No, not yet.
Oh my.
Is it in PowerPoint?
Can I probably send my presentation to?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. If you send the presentation to us, we can show it to you.
To Rosangela. To Rosangela.
Yes.
Okay.
Perfect.
So what about me giving the floor to Grigory Kazakov, who will tell us about how much input is necessary for studying a language in an intensive mode, and I will do it meanwhile. Please, Grigory, will you start your speech?
Okay, well, dear colleagues, good afternoon. I hope it will work on my computer here, because it's also almost practically the first time I've used Google Meet myself, but I hope things will work. Let me just open. Can you see it?
Yes.
Yes, it's coming.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes,
Perfect.
we can see it. Great, Grigory. Thank you.
Let me just
And if you
go
go
full
to
screen.
F11 or something, yeah, or also in the third, yeah, start presentation as you always do.
So you see the full screen, right, of my PowerPoint?
No.
So far, we see the two, you know, the big one and the small ones in the left side, the left column, but we can see well. So if you want to go this way, it's okay. But if you want to start entire screen, it will, yeah, F11 for Windows, and you have here in the chat, for Mac is Control Command F. And then you have the enlarged presentation, and
it is full screen on my computer here, but I don't know, maybe it just doesn't get through in this format, because now I can see it as full screen on my computer, and you only see part of it, right?
But you can go like this.
Yeah, if it's visible, I can perhaps proceed. Thank you.
Yes,
well,
it's okay.
Dear colleagues, then perhaps by way of introduction to our roundtable on polyglottery, I will start with a broader issue of language acquisition and language learning by reference to the concept of input. I will use, as part of the sources I rely on, the data of polyglottery, and perhaps this way, from a broader issue, we will pass on to the specific questions of polyglottery with subsequent presentations. Well, my observations of the language learning process that takes place, well, as described by polyglots in their memoirs, and as described by many language teachers in their publications on the subject, it seems there's a lot of evidence that one of the major concepts of one of the major variables and concepts in language acquisition, the one that determines the process depends on, is input, by which I mean perceived speech material. So the number of texts that the learner has read in the target language or has listened to in the target language. So the number of samples of speech, read fragments of language, he or she has processed through his brain. Input is absolutely necessary, as we understand, for first language acquisition, the acquisition of mother tongues by children in early childhood. Without exposition, without exposure to input from adults, from parents, from the mother in particular, it's impossible to acquire one's native tongue. So it seems that, like a certain program in the brain, right, starts operating, analyzing this large arrays of material coming from the people speaking the language to the child around him, from which, perhaps by some statistical models, the brain manages to discern, to crystallize recurrent patterns of speech, which then gradually make components of the language throughout the language development in children. Input is also one of the main variables in second language acquisition, especially in the comprehensible input hypothesis monitor model by Stephen Krashen, which my observations and my data, my experience with language education seems to confirm. And it's also has been recognized, in particular at the Polyglot Gathering of 2017 in Bratislava, that input is also an objective measure of language knowledge, according to data from polyglottery. So at that gathering, at that conference, there were a number of talks and discussions among polyglots, from which I generalized that indeed there's an understanding that input, so the number of language material a learner has processed, has read, has listened to, is actually what can objectively indicate his language, the measure of his language knowledge. Otherwise, we have to rely on functional skills, like in the European framework.
Professor, are you in the first slide? Because we can only see the first slide now.
Oh, no, I'm in the second slide now, so it doesn't
Yeah,
work.
it's not passing.
Oh, because I am changing slides right here, but it's yeah, also strange. So it's only the title slide that you can see at the moment.
Yes.
Oh, very
Just click
No,
in the slide you want to.
but that's what I do, but it doesn't seem to
That's
change.
it. That's it.
Now the
Yes,
second is
okay.
okay.
Now we can
Okay.
see the
Okay.
Slide
second one.
changed, Grigory.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And it's also, it seems it's an objective measure of language knowledge, because the more input one has processed, the more text one has read or listened to in the language, then objectively, the higher his level of language knowledge should be. Otherwise, we have to rely perhaps on things which are more difficult to test, such as functional skills and other things which would require more complex procedures of testing, right? And perhaps introduce a subjective aspect to it. So the question is, if there is an understanding that input is crucial, is absolutely necessary for language acquisition, language learning, the question remains, how much exactly do we need to learn a language to this or that particular level? Is there a number? Can we calculate it? Can we rely on this? So I would say that in general, the question remains open for further research, but there still are there is certain data that we can appeal to and address, which I think give us some clues and guidelines in terms of understanding and arriving at some general approximate estimates as to how much input can be necessary for just language, for the study of foreign languages in general language learning situations. So, and these, the sources of information I rely on are three. One is from developmental linguistics, from observations of children's speech development. One is from corpus linguistics, and one is from polyglottery. And this is the data I would like to share with you, then arriving at some conclusions. So children's speech. Well, there's a famous study by Hart and Risley studying the development of several dozen American children in early childhood. So then they don't really focus on linguistics and on language in particular. Rather, it seems they're more interested in general development, intellectual development, and subsequent performance in education. But they do provide certain data concerning language development too. So in particular, they made a calculation of the input in terms of the number of words the children of different family backgrounds receive on daily basis. So I think they calculated like an hour of input per day, and then they just extrapolated it and calculated how much that would be on average, say, per day. So, and their results were as follows: that on average in low-income families, children hear about 616 words a day. In middle-income families, 1,251, and in rich families, 2,153 words, which, if we multiply it, well, by the number of days, number of hours and days, and then years, given 14 hours of wakefulness with children per day, right? Because naturally, when they're asleep, we don't count the inputs. This would lead us to the following figures, which you can see in the final column. So if we count this input relying on these figures that's indicated in the first column, so if we calculate it for 4 years, then the numbers will be as follows. So in low-income families, 13 million, middle-income families, 26 million, and rich families, 45 million words. So then if we just calculate the average, the mean, it will be 28 million words for all kinds of families on average. So this would be, it would be interesting to compare this to the fact that by the age of 4, the vocabulary, the size of vocabulary in children of that age is on average from 1,500 to 2,000 words. So it's interesting that, well, around 30 million words of input seem to result in about 1,500 to 2,000 words of accumulated vocabulary by that age. So that's what we have from, say, first language acquisition in children. So the second source of data that I came across on this issue is a corpus linguistics study by Paul Nation, a New Zealand professor of language acquisition, in particular vocabulary acquisition and reading. So he posed the question, how many words do do we need to read in terms of what text containing how many words do we need to read to come across the words, the second, third, etc., from the 2nd to the 9,000 most frequent English word family. So words like access, accessible, inaccessible, that would be counted as one word family. So how many words do we have to read in order to come across these words at least 12 times? 12 times being regarded as the number necessary for natural retention of the word in memory. So what is the size of the text in terms of the number of words that we need to read in order to naturally, in terms of natural frequency of vocabulary in language, to come across these words for us to remember them from just simple reading? So his results were as follows, using the methodology of corpus linguistics and English language corpora. So he arrived at the following results, that the 2,000 most frequent English word families require the input of about 200,000 words. The 3rd,000, 300,000. The 4th,000, as you can see, 500,000. The 5th,000, 1 million. 6,000, 1,500,000 words of input. 7,000, 2 million words. 8,000, 2,500,000, and the 9,000, 3 million. So why 9,000 in total? Because, well, in his estimates, 9,000 is the level of vocabulary. So if we have a vocabulary of about 9,000 words, this enables us to read practically any text in the target language, and we will be able to understand most of it, right? Of course, there will be new words that will be coming across once in a while, but this size of vocabulary will be enough for us to be able to interpret them from context. So this is a corpus linguistics study with its results. And finally, interesting observations from polyglottery in particular, something we're focusing on in this roundtable. This is the observations I took note of at the same Polyglot gathering 2017 in Bratislava by Rick Diemen in his presentation, so which was about the use of video, audio, and similar resources in language study. So he just shared the empirical observations that some language users, language learners made and shared in online language learning forums by reference to the use of video in language study. So kind of making the average of those empirical observations and calculations. So he presented the following figures. So according to those empirical estimates by language users, they needed about 150 hours of video in order to reach B1 level, if we rely on the European framework of reference for language learning, for language skills. So the B2 level required about 366 hours of video input, C1 590 hours, and C2 level required more than 2,000 hours of video in the target language. So if we if we accept that 1 hour of video on average contains about 5,000 words, this is also the figure provided in Paul Nation's work, which I cited earlier. So by contrast to reading, which gives twice as many words, about 10,000. 1 hour of reading would be more rich in input. So 1 hour of video is about 5,000 words. So if we calculate the input for the number of hours indicated, so we see the number of words that I made indicated there in the final column. So 705,000 and 50,000 for B1 level, about 2 million words of input for B2 level, about 3 million for C1, and about 10 million words of input necessary for C2 level. So this is the third source, in particular the polyglots observations that I wanted to share with you. So if we generalize that, so compare the three sources of information, the particular data that they provide us with, I think it is possible to arrive at the following conclusion. So in the first place, input if we ask ourselves the question how much input we need, then it must be calculated in relation to the level of proficiency in the target language, which we regard as the goal of study. So it's impossible just to say, to give a particular figure for all cases, right? We just have to say that we need this number of words of input for, say, A1, B2, etc., or for perhaps of a different level if we use different terminology. Now, in general terms, if we accept that the threshold level, well, B1, B2 functional level of language proficiency is enough for most foreign language education goals, so on school education, etc., not for professional language training, apparently. So if we say that, well, B level is enough for most, as a goal for most language education situations, then it seems that it corresponds to an input of about 1 million words, which then we can use as a number to to rely on when we design curricula, when we calculate how many words our textbook should contain, how many words our readers for students should contain, how many hours of video or audio we should listen to or watch in class or for home as home tasks. So I think this is of practical use, these particular calculations. And also another interesting conclusion is that child first language acquisition requires many times more, several dozen times more input than learning a foreign language with adults. So it seems like after first language acquisition, we have a certain perhaps system, a certain model already operating in our mind, right, in our brain, that makes the study of subsequent languages as foreign languages in adulthood, meaning adulthood in linguistic sense after the age of puberty, then it's much more efficient, requires many times more, several dozen times less input than first language acquisition. So these are the particular results I wanted to share with you, dear colleagues. So these are the references I made use of. They're also, the more detailed text is available in the book of proceedings, and the abstracts, which I have seen, is already available. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Grigory. That was a good start. Did Rosanchela get my presentation?
Yes.
Shall we start? And we'll wait for the discussion until all the reports are held. So, Rosanchela, would you like to show the presentation, the first slide, please?
Yes.
Professor Dina.
Professor Dina NIKULICHEVA. Dina,
yes, I know. I sent an email message to Elisa POLESE. And
I'm here.
Elisa,
I listened to Grigori's presentation, to Professor. So I listened to it. So sorry, it was a mistake from my side about the time. So I was a bit confused. So, but I listened to like 95% of the last presentation. So thank you very much for the presentation. And sorry to make you worry. I didn't mean to.
I have already introduced you, Elisa. So we are okay. Rosanchela, can we make the screen wider? Because I also see very little screen. Can anyone see the big screen?
It's full screen here.
Yeah, I can see it very well.
Yeah. I can see it very well too.
Oh, great. So this is what is needed. So I start. And Elisa will be number 3.
Dina, comments would be made at the end of all presentations. Thank you.
Yes, of all presentations. So what I'm going to present now is to start a discussion about how many languages are to be learned at once or in a sequence. I'm going to offer you some unusual and rather unique material that was collected over extended period of my observing a polyglot in action. What follows is an external psycholinguistic research of a polyglot studying 10 languages over 1,000 days. The project began on September 11, 2018, and ends on June 6, 2021. A coach in the field of personal growth and self-discipline from Vladikavkaz, Alan Bigulov, set himself the task of applying his best practices in field of coaching to the task of intensive study of multiple languages. Yes, this is slide 2. Alan Bigulov himself unfortunately could not participate because he is now at the most crucial final stage of his project, with no time to spare. So he allowed me to present this project. When starting such a large-scale project, Alan already had considerable experience in learning languages. The language of communication at work and at home for him is Russian, which Alan considers his native, but also the language of his ancestors, Ossetian, he has been hearing around from his childhood, but never actually practiced. Before his 10 languages project, Alan learned several European languages. He could already speak English, French, and Spanish. Alan Bigulov and I met in 2018 at the Polyglot conference in Ljubljana. It is the picture from that meeting. There we agreed that I would monitor his 1,000-day experiment. Alan would describe his progress in languages, send videos of his communication sessions in the language studied, and I would ask leading questions and offer my comments. The short presentation format allows me to acquaint you with only the most significant results of the project. This is result 1. Please, slide 3, yes. Wave dynamics of performance through the project. Comparing the semantics of the evaluative predicates in Alan's monthly letters about the course of the experiment, I could not fail to notice fluctuations in how he subsequently assessed the quality of communication in each of the studied languages. The dynamics of the fluctuations turned out to be quite significant and had a wavy character from language to language. Of course, there were various external disturbing factors, such as his own trainings, illnesses of parents, preparation of reports for conferences, a parallel training program for his followers, and even his COVID episode. But in general, the cyclical ups and downs were quite evident. I can illustrate this on the general diagram reflecting the fluctuations in self-assessment of the results achieved in each of the studied languages. This is this drawing. The highest peaks in satisfaction with the results were observed in his first language, Esperanto, the fourth language, Italian, the seventh language, Hindi, and languages 9, 10, Turkish and Chinese. One might argue that the success in Esperanto and Italian can be explained in part by prior learning of such Romance languages as Spanish and French. However, the least successful experience of the entire experiment was associated with Farsi, the language of the southern subgroup of languages of the Iranian group. Typologically, the closest out of all the languages in the experiment to his familiar Ossetian language belonging to the northeastern subgroup of the same language group. In general, the wave-like fluctuations of performance over 1,000 days by Alan Bigulov resemble the dynamics, the next slide please, of another polyglot in the process of learning a single language. Yes. Take an example of a 100-day study of Hebrew by the famous American polyglot Alexander Ageres, whom I started in 2014. The monitoring revealed a three-part rhythm of the emotional sinusoid. The first part, day 139, was characterized by a stable emotional uplift. The second third, day 4078, a rapid decline. And the last third, day 79, 113, is characterized by a repeated rise. The factors that influence the changing efficiency in the case of Alexander Agelis turned out to be associated with the routine of language learning. On the contrary, when Agelis consciously changed the types of his activities, he experienced an emotional upswing and a new quality of assimilation of the material that was published in Russian journal Questions of Psycholinguistics, and this is the link to this article. Moving to the linguodidactic behavior, monitoring the linguodidactic behavior of Alan Bigulov in each of the 100 days of the experiment suggests a similar explanation. Alan's reports about his progress with his first language, Esperanto, were highly positive. We can also return to the curve of all languages. This is slide 3, I guess. Oh, no, this is, yes, this curve. At the end of the course, he wrote, in Esperanto, in passive acquisition, I reached C1 level. Now I'm watching a course in astrophysics in Esperanto. In active fluency, B2 level. Moving on to the second language, he wrote, in the German language, progress is 5 times slower than it was with Esperanto. The language makes great demands on the management of motivation, especially against the background of the disease of both my parents, although the intensity of the classes was unchanged. In May 2019, Alan reported, I study languages every day without a break for average of 5 hours. And on March 30, 2019, I started learning Japanese, which I am currently focusing on. At the same time, I continue to study the German language. I continue to practice English, Esperanto, Spanish, and French. I have also mastered the basic level of a session language, and now I am looking for materials for further studies in it. In his further letters, the Japanese language was no longer mentioned. And on my direct question about the results he answered, in the Japanese 100 days, I was deeply disappointed by the almost complete lack of progress in the language, despite the daily classes. It was an anti-breakthrough. This was definitely a kind of crisis caused by the poor health of his parents and the dispersal of time and effort on many projects. The real breakthrough took place during the 100 days with Italian, when Alan completely moved away from the standard classes based on textbooks and conversational courses focused on one language and created his own polyglot conversational course. In fact, he consistently followed the technique "speak from yourself" that was described in my book. And here you can show the book, please, Rosangela, the slide of the book. Yes, Linguistic and Psychological Strategies of Polyglots. Speaking, Reading, Writing, book from 2013. The essence of this method is that communication is focused on content that is relevant for a specific language learner. The learner discusses his typical actions in typical places, as well as goals and values relevant to him. At the same time, attention is purposefully drawn to the interconnection of certain grammatical structures with certain cognitive representations characteristic of different levels of personal verbalization. Will you please show the pyramid? The slide of the pyramid. Yes. This is how Alan describes his Italian lessons in the letter to me. The sub-threshold exercise series that you developed worked very well. The idea of a sequential passage through the identity pyramid made it possible to quickly start speaking on important topics about myself. With the help of a teacher and native Italian speakers, Alan compiled 7 or 8 dialogues about himself for each of the identity levels: environment, actions, capabilities, values, self-identification. 40 dialogues in general. For example, on the topic of actions, there were dialogues like: cosa ami fare? E tu? Che mi dici di te? Cosa sogni di imparare? Cosa pensi di fare nel fine settimana? Or other dialogues. Here is the example of one of the dialogues. Will you please show the example of the dialogues that Alan created for himself, translated with the help of native speakers and then used in multiple conversations? Cosa pensi di fare nel fine settimana? Here is what Alan writes about his results in the middle of the Italian course. 30 days after the start, I found 2 native speakers, a boy and a girl, and arranged a Skype meeting. They did not know me before and did not know my level of language proficiency and did not prepare for the meeting in any way. As a result, I was able to communicate with each of them for almost an hour, conducting a lively dialogue. They were very surprised when they found out that I have only been studying Italian for a month. The speed of mastering Italian, according to my observations, exceeds the experience with Esperanto. Undoubtedly, acquaintance with other Romance languages, French and Spanish and others, English, Esperanto, considerable time of study, in 50 days, 340 hours, that can be interesting for Grigory, and concentration on a language significantly contributed to mastering the language at a such fast pace. In the second part of the Italian 100 days, Alan used social networks to participate in the interviews and answered more than 200 questions from his interlocutors. He writes, I didn't notice any signs of a language barrier when communicating with native speakers. Previously, the language barrier was quite obvious. My hypothesis is that a structured worksheet for the course minimizes the chances of developing a language barrier. I willingly switch to Italian. I do not feel embarrassed even if I make mistakes and lack of vocabulary. So just one day I talked with a teacher, just the other day I talked with a teacher of the Indonesian language who speaks English and Italian. And I preferred to communicate with her in Italian and explain to her in detail all the means and features of the upcoming classes. Indonesian is his next language. I have never seen such rapid progress in learning languages, especially in mastering speaking skills. The effectiveness of the developed methodology was further confirmed by 100 days with the Indonesian language, October 19, January 20. At the end of the course, Alan used a new form of work for the first time. He conducted an experiment in creating a super intensive language immersion online. He arranged 14 one-hour-long conversations with 14 different native speakers in one day, from 4 p.m. to 10 p.m. He found his interlocutors on the website italki.com. Inspired by the results, Alan returned to multitasking. He organized his own training language with Joy Polyglot conversational course, which coincided with the 100-day Farsi learning, February-May 2020. As a result, he failed to achieve the desired outcome at the end of the 100 days. Show, please, the initial curve, Rosangela. Yes, this one. So you see, it was the gap again. I never managed to get to the conversation level, he wrote. The negative experience with Farsi was taken into account during his 100 days with Hindi, which turned out to be the next breakthrough. Alan stopped practicing other languages, focusing only on Hindi, minimized possible distractions and third-party interactions. On average, he studied Hindi for 5 hours a day. He revised his system of dialogues. At that stage, Alan wrote to me, I noticed how bored I got in my own classes that became quite mechanistic. So he decided to reconstruct a completely natural linguistic situation that would serve the brain as a trigger to assimilate grammatical structures and vocabulary. So, Rosangela, please show the drawing further. Yes, this one, thank you. It is interesting to notice that Alan Begulov, like Alexander Argelis, in the process of learning Hebrew, faced the phenomenon that I call routinization. Learning Italian, Alan for the first time arranged communication practice in accordance with the levels of identity pyramid. Such process gave him the effect of novelty and breakthrough. But being repeated 3 times with 3 other languages within several months, building dialogues according the same model, created the opposite effect of artificiality and boredom. And here the most valuable quality of polyglot was manifested, the ability to flexibly change the algorithm of practice in order to achieve a new round of intensity. Now Alan began to build dialogues according to his own model of 3 levels of reality in the linguistic situation. This is his own drawings, how Alan illustrates the process. This experimentally derived communication model has not yet been properly studied and linguistically described. This is our plan for the future, but in general, it seems that this effective model of structuring speech practice takes the form of a kind of a spiral, expanding from the middle in space and time. From the center, level 1, in the middle, who am I and what am I, internal reality, first person, through who are you and what are you, first person, external reality, to what is my world and what is your world, external reality, third person, and further to level 2, what do I do in my life and what am I doing just now and what happens or is happening in the world around me, and what are you doing and what happens in the world around you. And then level 3, internal and external reality, in what circumstances, where and when it was, past, or perhaps it will happen, future. How would you like it to happen? Why? For what reason? Etc. So these are not only levels of reality combined, but different time perspectives, which is also very essential. What is essential here is that each level needs its own lexical and grammatical support, and the logic of entering colloquial practice sets a certain sequence of passing through these levels of reality, and as a consequence, the sequence of mastering grammatical structures and vocabulary. Another innovation that helped Alan to overcome the effect of routinization was the idea of consciously varying the intensity within 100 days period. Slide 9, please. He was prompted to do this both by the experience of my modeling Alexander Argelis and by taking into account the fluctuations in intensity that occurred during the first half of his own 1,000 days experiment. As a result, having started Hindi, Alan deliberately distributed periods of different intensity throughout 100 days. First low intensity, then intensity increases, then recession, then reaching the super intensive peak, then lowering intensity drastically by 80%, and then final super intensive. The example of closing interview can be seen on slide 10, please. You can find it on the link on YouTube. This is 1 hour interview with an Indian blogger, a very famous one, on motivation strategies, coaching, and language learning. If you open it on YouTube, you can enjoy how fluent and relaxed Alan is in his 1 hour conversation in Hindi. Analyzing the entire path traveled, Alan wrote, conscious management of the intensity of classes in the course of learning a language was one of the most important discoveries that 1,000 days experience taught me. Alan's third most important discovery during the 1,000-day period, which helped to reach a new peak in efficiency after the decline in Arabic, 100 days, partly due to his COVID infection, was to maximize the potential of the initial stage of language learning. This is slide 11, please. Yes. He started last 200-day periods with 5 days of the Turkish super intensive and 10 days of the Chinese super intensive. This brought him to the conclusion that the length of the entering into speaking practice can be significantly reduced by starting with a super intensive entry period. This is how Alan Bigulov described it to himself. On the 4th day of the super intensive start, I was already able to conduct a conversation in Turkish for 30 minutes, to the utter amazement of native speakers, as they expected to meet a student with elementary level, as I warned them in my message. I have never achieved such a quick result before, even in Esperanto. Many native speakers refuse to believe that I have only been studying Turkish a few days. Here is the link on YouTube, and you can see a film about Alan's Turkish super intensive. I will not dwell on the still unfinished Chinese period, which introduces a number of new innovations due to the specifics of this language, but in general, it confirms the main principles discovered during the experiment. And this is my last slide, slide 10. Slide 10, please. The next slide. These are main strategies. First, consistent focus on one language. Second, a 3-level model of a spiral entry into a communicative situation. 3, the effectiveness of the super intensive start. 4, deliberate wave-like variation of the intensity of classes, and the importance of flexible changes in the algorithm of classes in order to avoid routine and reach a new level of intensity. At the end of the experiment, Alan Bigulov and I plan to thoroughly study it stage by stage. But as far as this roundtable is concerned, I wanted to share with you the above 5 principles and listen to your opinions about their relevance in your own experience. Thank you. Thank you. And now I want to close my presentation and give the floor to probably my opponent, Professor Elisa POLESE, who is going to introduce her approach of simultaneous learning of multiple languages. Elisa, please, you're welcome.
Thank you very much. So I wanted to, I will try to share my screen from here. Okay. Okay. I wanted to ask you whether you are able to see my screen.
Yes, yes,
okay.
Great.
Perfect. Okay, so thank you very much. Let's get started. So what my presentation has two main points. So multilingual learning is not only possible but also beneficial because it speeds up the language learning process and helps avoid language interferences. And anyone can learn multiple languages at the same time without mixing them up, providing that the right techniques and strategies are used. So I don't want to talk about myself. I just wanted to tell you that I've been teaching for over 20 years. I've studied more than 25 languages and I teach 13 of them. And I started teaching multilingual classes since 2016. And I wrote a book about that, which is called How to Become Fluent in Multiple Languages. Okay, so in order to be able to learn multiple languages simultaneously, this can be done on your own or in a classroom. Of course, the teacher has to be able to do that. So what are the techniques? So for sure, it's very important to use similarities of the different languages at your advantage. This is, but the most important point is to focus on differences, because now I'm talking about learning languages which have something in common, something visible. I mean, many of them come from the same language family, but I'm talking about for normal people who want to learn languages now. So to focus on differences. So many people don't want to learn like Italian, French, Spanish, Portuguese together because they don't want to mix languages up. But if you focus especially on differences, then you will learn how not to mix them up. And you can use similarities at your advantage, and this means that this part will help you speed up your learning process. So the third point is to focus on language features, because it's also what helps your brain to keep languages separate in your brain, of course. And how do you do that? You want to notice the language features. I will talk about that in a second. And the fourth element is to train language switching. So you it doesn't require lots of effort, but at the beginning it must be trained, because especially if someone is not used to learn multiple languages at the same time or many languages at all in general, then it's very important. This step is very important, but it doesn't take long at all. So by language features, I mean recurrent differences between two similar languages, or special characteristics of a given language. So, for example, a super easy example is that many words in Spanish and Italian are very similar, actor, attore, and the pattern is very, very similar. So, tore, actor. And once you are aware of that, you will never confuse director with direttore. It's impossible. Once you understand how the language works, what is possible. For example, in Italian, we almost never have a consonant at the end of a word, almost never. It doesn't mean it doesn't exist, but it's very rare. So if, for example, the student is thinking about, or you're thinking about a word and the word ends with a consonant, most probably it's not Italian. So you can try to find the equivalent word which is closer to your idea of Italian. And you can do it on your own, or you can have someone helping you. So apart from techniques, you can use strategies. Some of them are actually many points in common with learning one language, because learning multiple languages at the same time is nothing else in a way that when we learn to dance boogie woogie, when you learn salsa, they have many things in common anyway, so it helps you speaking the language more quickly if you have already learned something similar before, or if you are already learning it at the same time. So this is why there are certain strategies which I would say that most people should learn how to learn, because when we learn what to focus on and how to use the time efficiently, then we can speed up the learning process. We should also take into account our lifestyle, the way we feel. We don't feel the same way at the end of a working day. We don't feel it the same day in the morning if we are a night old. So it really depends, and we don't feel the same, or we have different preferences according to our personality, and this must also be taken into account when we learn a language. On the other hand, also so in the first presentation we heard about the number of hours that children need as far as input is concerned, and adults are driven by results. So this is why it's very important to keep, in order to keep your motivation high, it's very important to focus on priorities. By priorities, I mean, why am I learning a language? I'm learning a language because I want to speak, then I have to put most of my effort towards that goal. It doesn't mean that I will not train the other skills, but if I focus on what is most important, I see results much more quicker, and I feel much more motivated, and I can keep the process and I keep improving my languages. The third point is routine building. Consistency is the key. I mean, I have heard, of course, we're not consistent 100% of the time. We are not machines, but it's very important to, especially when the beginning of our language learning, for example, if my level is already B2, I don't need to practice this language as often as if my level was A1. So this is why consistency is the key, especially when our level is not that high, and we need to build a doable routine, because point two, most people are don't feel motivated because at the beginning are very enthusiastic, and after a while they decide to study for so many hours a day, and this is not doable for a longer period of time unless it's an experiment, or unless it's really what you love and your passion. And maintaining and adjusting your routine is also very important, because I think in many learning contexts, what is not really taken into account, not by everyone, but by most people, is to teach students how to overcome moments of struggle, because we all have moments where we doubt ourselves, and if we are not able to overcome them, what will happen is that we will just say, the language is too difficult, I'm not good at languages, and we stop. Do people need a course to learn multiple languages at the same time? Not necessarily. Like if you're already experienced in learning languages, you do not need it necessarily. You just need to learn some techniques. But of course, like most things in life, you can start on your own, but knowing the directions and how to get there will greatly speed up your learning process. So it's the same with business. You can do random things and you can be very good at them, but when you know what you have to do, you will see results much faster. So some advantages of being guided: of course, you will be able to use more your time more efficiently. You can learn multiple languages in a way that is not overwhelming, and you can. My idea is that when you learn multiple languages at the same time, instead of learning one language, let's say every month, every year, every 2 years, you can use the time you have to increase one or more, so that you will not be learning only for 1 month, 1 year, or 2 years. You will be learning for the whole time while learning also other languages at the same time. So in general, some other advantages, So motivation, you can achieve your language goals, and if you are guided maybe by someone who knows about psychology or psycholinguistic and everything, you can also overcome your moments of struggle. And some possible disadvantages of not being guided. Of course, even famous polyglots have tried to learn multiple languages at the same time, and if not done properly, multilingual learning may lead to confusion, linguistic interference, difficulties in reaching the desired language level, difficulty in switching from one language to another, and motivation issues. But this can easily be avoided. So why people usually think this is not possible? Normally, the two main concerns are that they mix languages up, or they think that learning multiple languages at the same time will decrease the learning speed. So, in fact, when people mix languages up, it is because one of the more following points are always true. So normally people don't mix languages up because they are too similar, or normally they mix them up because they don't practice them enough. And by that I mean maybe they know a language at a B2 level, they love that language, they keep using it in their day-to-day life, and then they learn a new language, they study maybe one day and then don't do anything for 1 week, and then they say, but only my main language comes to my mind. This is completely normal. So the brain goes back to what is easier. So the point is to train to keep. This is why I said consistency is the key. So people always mix languages up only because either they learn or speak one language more than others, and the brain goes back to the more frequently used language or languages. They rarely speak these languages. They know one language very well, but the other or others not as well in comparison, and they don't practice the newer ones. They are not used to switching between languages, and the language features of one or more languages are not clear yet. And this can be avoided. So what is actually true is that learning multiple languages at the same time helps you avoid mixing languages up, and speed up your learning process. Why? So when you study similar languages, what happens is that first, as far as grammar is concerned, once you have understood a certain grammar point in one language, it takes considerably less time to understand the same or a similar grammar point in another similar language. So when I teach, normally it takes maybe 20 minutes to understand the past tense in Italian, but when I explain it in French, it takes maybe 15 or 10 minutes. And when I explain it in Spanish, maybe it takes 5 minutes. So it's really not proportional the time you need to learn a similar grammar point in similar languages. As far as the vocabulary is concerned, you don't have to learn everything from scratch, because you should learn the differences. And when you see a word which is very similar to another language you're learning or that you already know, it will be much easier for you to remember it. And in order to avoid the interferences, that you should focus especially on words which are completely different. And you might try to think that if you don't remember how to say a certain basic word in a language which is similar to another language you already know you are studying, probably it's because it's very similar, and you focus on differences. And also so in general, you speed up your learning process because you don't have to do everything from scratch. And this is what happens when you learn one language and then another, and maybe the next one in 2 years' time, and you will have forgotten maybe you will be fluent in, let's say you are fluent in French, and you want to learn Italian, and if you're really fluent, when you're really fluent, you forget the rules, unless you teach the language, of course. You forget the language, you forget the rules, because you already speak it fluently in an automatic way. But when you learn them at the same time, you don't have to go through learning the rule again or refreshing the way the rule was. You already know it. And this works at any level. You don't have to have all the languages at the same level. You can have a language which is already C1, you want to improve it, a language which never seen in your life, a language which has a B1 level, it always works. I teach up to 13 languages at the same time, and it always worked. So I don't know if you want. So here in this case, I taught for 10 minutes. It was a 10-minute class where I taught Italian and French to a Brazilian guy, and I don't know if you can hear the sound. See the result after 10 minutes. It was not like a long class, it was just...
Che ti piace fare nel tempo libero? Nel tempo libero mi piace viaggiare, vedermi con gli amici, guardare serie televisive, imparare lingue e fare sport. Ah, benissimo. J'aime voyager, j'aime sortir avec mes amis et j'aime faire du sport. Ah, très bien.
Okay.
Just said a multilingual lesson. Could you tell us how long we have studied together before doing it? Yeah, I would say 10 minutes. Top 15, I didn't count, but 10 minutes. And what did you know before? Well, I'm a native Portuguese speaker and I can speak Spanish as well. They are quite similar to Italian and French. They have the same origin. But I've never studied this language before. What do you think now about learning two or more languages at the same time? I was really curious about it. I didn't know if it would work at all. I had no idea how it would work. But in some way, I think it worked because my brain had to change from one language to another. And I think it's better for me to memorize stuff because I can see the similarities and difference than if I would have just Italian lesson and then French lesson and try to memorize the two of them by themselves. So, and I don't have to work the same way. I just would try to memorize one and the other, and maybe they would later be similar to me, but I wouldn't notice the difference, and I would mix them later. And I think doing together, I will mix them less often. What is? Did you mix them up? No, I would say maybe at the first moment, because we started with Italian, then we went to French. I want to say some things in Italian because I still didn't know the words in French, but after I knew everything, it was quite clear.
Okay.
Quite separate.
Okay. Wanted to. So maybe you might think, okay, there are very similar languages. So what happens with unlike languages? So actually, if you study multiple languages at the same time and one or more languages do not belong to the same type of language, I will not say feminist because if we look at the origin, of course, most of them look alike, but so many of them, not most. But so what happens is that your brain will thank you for a rest. So it's actually, if you study, for example, Italian, French, and then you study Russian or you study Hindi, you study Arabic, it's actually as if you were taking a rest. So students are normally not more tense, more like relaxed, because the brain, in a way, it's a different effort. It's like using a different muscle in that very moment. And but there are still many benefits. So it doesn't work only with very similar languages, because no matter what, the fact that you are using the same part of the brain, that you are developing your language skills, that you are learning how to learn, will help you in general improve your general understanding of grammar and how languages work. And this will help you pick up new bits of languages much more quickly. And even languages which do not have so much in common, or they do not look so much alike, there will always be something, either a word or grammar point or sound or an expression which is similar in another language. And this will help a mental association. And even if it's similar but it doesn't mean the same, it will still help you remember how to pronounce a certain word. So it really helps. So just super quickly, I will not show all of it, but I just wanted to show that I thought also he is a German guy, and he's not really, languages are not really his thing, and I taught him Russian for 10 minutes, and of course not perfect 10 minutes. I mean, it would be very nice if it was perfect after 10 minutes, but I will not show you all of it because a bit. So after 10 minutes.
Hallo nochmal. Hallo.
Jetzt Russisch.
Jetzt Russisch.
Как тебя зовут?
Как тебя зовут?
Меня зовут.
Где ты живешь?
Где ты живешь?
Я живу в Тюрке.
На каких языках?
На каких языках ты говоришь?
Я говорю по-немецки, по-английски и чуть-чуть по-испански. Я люблю готовить. Я люблю пиццу и сок.
Okay, so it was very big, and I'm almost done. So hello.
Hallo nochmal.
I didn't want. That's the one. Okay, so I think yeah, that's it. So thank you very much for your attention, and I'm looking forward to your question and to our discussion all together.
Thank you very much, Elisa. We have one more report, and then we're looking for the discussion. I'm all eager. Stepan KULAKOV, I'm giving you the floor, and you'll tell about general polyglot agenda in recent times.
Thank you. Hello.
I believe Elisa is still presenting, so maybe Stefan would like to present something, and for that, yes, thank you, Elisa. Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
May I make.
You have to turn on your microphone, Professor Leonard.
First, I would like to very nice round table. I want to comment first.
Professor Leonor, excuse me, Professor Leonor. We have another talk
sorry,
yes,
sorry.
Yes,
I understood that the
we have
the floor was open for discussion.
No, it's
not
for
yet.
Sorry,
Stepan will use 10-15 minutes in order to give us time for plenary discussion. Thank you.
Sorry. All right. So I'm going to try to summarize the data of all the polyglot themed roundtables starting from 2013, and try to get to the main agenda. So the first roundtable that I'm going to talk about is the one that took place during the International Conference on Multilingual Proficiency in New York in 2013, and that was the first proper roundtable in which not only polyglots participated, but also people who study linguistics. So it was some sort of a joint effort, really. So this will be pretty much the benchmark for all the subsequent roundtables. The main topics that were touched upon during this very roundtable as follows. The first one was who do we define as a polyglot? Is it a person who knows a certain amount of languages? Is it a person who just has a passion of some sort to learn languages? Of course, this will be one of those topics that will just be that people will just keep touching upon further and further on. The other one is what does it mean to know a language? Of course, no one can really answer this question, and it always brings some sort of a big discussion, and it was the case during this very round table. Among other opinions, the notable ones are, for example, that to know a language, you have to be able to speak it on the academic level, for example, or maybe you know a language if you can just take part in a casual conversation. Well, as I said before, you cannot really answer this question, and polyglots will keep coming back to it further on. The other one is, can you know a language that isn't a mother tongue? Well, during that roundtable, I think it was pretty much concluded that this task is pretty much impossible because learning a language to the level of mother tongue requires a lot of assimilation and a lot of time. So in order to learn a language like your mother tongue, you have to spend you have to dedicate a long amount of time, and you also have to be in the right situation. The next topic is called switching, as it's called here, switching languages in action. In this case, it's concerning only adults who know multiple languages, such as polyglots. It's one of the brightest examples that you can hear by listening to that roundtable. Was an example of people who switch to the language of their parents when something emotional is happening. So, for example, if there's a Spanish family that lives in the United States of America, when there's some kind of when there's some kind of an emotional situation that's going on, they will always switch to Spanish. Yeah, there are lots of examples of code switching, and it'll be touched upon later. The next language, the next question is the most important one, I feel like, because right now it's the one that's been discussed over and over again, and that is how to implement polyglottery into the education system. Because polyglots are the people who know how to learn languages, and their experience is their experience could be very valuable for the for example, school education system, which don't prove to be very effective, and that's something that was discussed by the members of that roundtable as well. Another topic is are languages taught or learned, and concerning this question, the general consensus seems to be that there should be a switch from languages as something that could be taught into something that should be learned by people themselves. And as they say, during all the previous years of Latin language learning, prior to this, people thought about languages as something that should be taught like science, but in fact it's a completely different thing that requires a different kind of approach. So here are the subsequent roundtables, topical roundtables that I'm going to talk about. Well, if I can, because some of them unfortunately aren't available, even though there are claims that video recordings do exist. It could be pretty difficult to obtain them. So I'm going to talk about roundtables at Polyglot conference and polyglot conferences and polyglot gatherings, and on academic roundtables that well, such as this one, for example. So the first roundtable that I'm going to talk about is how hyperpolyglots learn languages. It was from the first polyglot gathering in Berlin, and as you see, the topics are actually quite similar to the ones from the New York conference, from the New York roundtable. It's about motivation to learn languages, how to learn language, of course, and time spent on learning them, acquiring vocabulary. Well, it's all pretty much falls into the same place. It's all about learning languages. There's also some different topics that are touched upon here. For example, race and gender influence on learning language, and which language you actually should use to learn other languages. Should you learn languages on, if you're a polyglot and know a lot of languages, should you use your knowledge to learn other languages? Should you, if you know French, should you learn the Romanic languages on French, for example, or should you learn it on your mother tongue? And the topic that it's already been talked about today is learning multiple languages at the same time, and the risks of losing your knowledge of one language if you learn a similar one at the same time. The next data is from the Polyglot conference in New York from 2015. That one is a bit different because this one covers the language learning industry. So as polyglottery becomes a bigger thing, the publishers also want to be involved. And in New York Polyglot conference, they got their own roundtable, and the topics that were discussed, you can see them on the screen. Still like effective learning methods. It's still the biggest concern. Personalized experience. When you when you're learning language, you should be able to find your own way to do it, to find the most efficient way for you. Also, you can see market for parents raising multilingual children. That's the kind of a new topic that wasn't really discussed back then in 2013, but it's becoming more and more relevant as times go by, as I managed to gather from analyzing all the roundtables. Another roundtable from the same conference was Polyglots at Work, and this one actually also presents an interesting theme of polyglots getting a job that's relevant to their knowledge of multiple languages. And among other topics, you can also see that code switching again makes an appearance. And another thing that was discussed is the skills that polyglots acquire while learning languages. And of course, learning languages is something that you need a certain skill set for, and that's the skill set that you can not only use for learning languages but also for other things, and it could come handy in the future. Well, for other things. So this is the Reykjavik roundtable of Polyglot conference, and this one is probably the closest one to the closest to the one in 2013 when it comes to the contents of the conversations that we had there. Like, and again, knowing a language is still a topic to be discussed. How do you determine knowing a language? Job application for polyglots, as I have talked a few moments ago, again becomes quite a significant topic. Neurolinguistics are also touched upon, and yeah, of course, the ways to start learning a language, the ways to learn languages. I couldn't get recorded from the Polyglot conference roundtable. As far as I know, it wasn't topical, and the topics that were discussed is polyglotry as social movement, determining language knowledge, and developing polyglottery as an academic discipline.
Stepan, I'm sorry to interfere. We need 15 minutes for the roundtable discussion. So you have 1 minute just to sum up, because some topics are similar. So please give the overview of the agenda.
Oh, yeah. Oh, of course.
Thank you. Excuse
Sorry
me.
for taking that long. All right. So since I need to sum this up, I'm going to show you the recurring topics of all those roundtables. It's motivation to learn languages. It's language education itself. It's language learning methods. Personalized language learning experience. Learning multiple languages at the same time. Code switching, and what does it mean to know language. I've already talked about all of this, so really no need to repeat myself. However, the new issues, as it seems, are language learning publishing market and polyglot employment opportunities, and particularly significant one seems to be raising multilingual children, as it got its own roundtable on the Polyglot gathering in 2020. Thanks for your attention. I think I'm finished here.
Professor, your phone is off. Could you unmute it?
So
yes.
Now I'm glad to open the general discussion for the whole roundtable. Professor Leonor, you were willing to say something for a start.
Well, your microphone, please, Professor Cabral.
Leonor, microphone. Your microphone.
I think it.
Well, I was saying that it was a quite intriguing roundtable with many questions to be made. I will comment the first presenter's paper, Grigory Kazakov. The first thing, because he spoke namely about the input, the input's role in first language acquisition. It was not, namely the topic was this. And I think that there is a point that should be mentioned, because we cannot speak only about quantity of words. to which the child is being exposed. We must look at the quality of this input. And you didn't mention the child-directed speech, CDES, that the input is not dependent only on the quantity of words. It depends also if it is the style that is adequate, and this is called child-directed speech. Because, for instance, adults, when they speak to children, they do not use neither first or second person discourse persons. They don't use persons of discourse. So this is characteristics. They speak only using concrete names and things that go towards the child's needs, emotional or physical needs. So the topics are also different. And so you must look also to the quality, the input qualities. And the second question is, the words were type words or tokens words, the number of words, because it surprised me the quantity of words in these shown statistics. So I think that they were tokens.
Yes, they were tokens.
Tokens. So these are my comments to your speech. And it was a nice speech, but I think that you must think about those questions I discussed. About Elisa POLESE, is like that we pronounce. It's an Italian name, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay. So it's Elisa POLESE.
Yes.
Well, very nice talk also. But I have a doubt also about the methodology used in yours approach, because to recognize the differences between the two languages that are being learned, there is a great defined problem, because the baby is born with the ability for recognizing all these different, the categorical sound differences that can be used for any language. But during his or her language acquisition, there is a decay of these original ability, and the child loses this original ability in favor of recognizing only the acoustic figures that would be used by the language that he or she is acquiring. Consequently, she or he will not internalize the phonetic gestures and automatize those phonetic gestures that will not be useful in his or her social-linguistic variety. And those are also automated, right? And so this process blocks, first of all, the individual perception for those differences that will not be useful. So, in the process of multilingual language acquisition, how is the learner capture the differences that he or she cannot perceive? You understand?
Can you answer the question, Elisa?
Yes,
and
sure.
maybe Grigory will also answer the question because it is a discussion. That is why we're here for. Thank you.
I think that the answer would be a guided teaching.
Yes.
A conscious one, because naturally the learner will not perceive the differences.
Excuse me, I just would like to reinforce Professor Leonor's question because during the talks I was very intrigued because forgive me if I missed it, but I think very little was said about the pronunciation. And to me, as a learner of a second foreign language, I am learning French now. And what Professor Leonor said is very true. I mean, our difficulty to perceive the difference between sounds, they go many times totally unnoticed. And then I would like to hear more about how the pronunciation, how do you deal with the phonetics of each language that's taught. Thank you.
Lisa, can you please answer the question?
So in my talk, I said that it can be guided or not guided. The reason for that, it depends on the person background. Of course, the least the person is used to learning languages, the more the person needs guidance. So the idea is that if the point is that when people learn multiple languages at the same time, either they do it because they're interested in them or because they have to somehow because of the work, so or a combination of them. So it really depends on, of course, the reason why, apart from writing about it, and I teach that. So this is why, of course, a guided multilingual learning is very important when people cannot perceive differences in sounds, when they cannot notice those things. So the reason why you could also, in theory, do it on your own is because if you have enough background, enough knowledge, you might be able to do that. But in any case, when we learn new things, we always learn either from books books or from people or from other methods. So if we learn new things, of course, we need guidance somehow. Even people who learn on their own, they learn also through observing people, through books, through other things. We cannot teach ourselves what we don't know. So of course we need somehow some guidance, and you can choose what kind of guidance you want. If you want, yeah, so everything is possible, and this is why what I do is to teach multiple languages at the same time. But before doing that, I learned it on my own. No one taught me to do that. I've been learning multiple languages at the same time for many years, and I didn't even know that it was special. It was just what I wanted to do, and I discovered what really makes people speak from the very first moment. How can people? I knew how I could learn languages, but to learn how to teach people that. And this is actually, you are completely right. If people cannot hear the difference, they need to be guided. And there are many ways to do that. And one way is, of course, through teaching or through books or through courses.
Thank you. So, Professor Grigory, I would like to hear your opinion about.
I can give a quick answer to your comments, Professor Cabral. So indeed, of course, the quality of input as well as other factors are very important in language learning. Well, comprehensibility, motivation, and the structure of study, the structure of this input. But in my presentation, my specific interest was exactly the quantity. So I just wanted to find out, do we have any data to identify any specific numbers that are necessary for language learning? And also, my focus wasn't exactly on language acquisition in children. This was just one of the sources of data I took for comparison, because basically my interest was about language learning, but learning foreign languages. So I only compared it to the data available about child language acquisition. So what was interesting for me was that with children, they require many more tokens of input when they acquire mother tongues. While adult learners, when they learn foreign languages, they require much less input. So dozens of times fewer input than children. But of course, the quality and other aspects of input must be taken into consideration. For example, in second language acquisition, well, the importance of comprehensibility is always highlighted. So maybe what you were saying about child-directed speech, which, as I understand, is the concept for this narrow sense of input in terms of developmental linguistics in children and child language acquisition. So this is also something that perhaps makes this outer input for children comprehensible, this child-directed speech, when adults simplify perhaps the language they address to children. So this is what they exposed to. So yes, I touched upon child language acquisition in terms of input quantity, but it wasn't the main point. So I only wanted to compare this data with language learning by adults and by polyglots in particular, what I say about it. Yeah, but thank you very much for your comments. I will certainly consider that in the future.
Thank you for your explanation.
So, dear colleagues, our time is running out. Unfortunately, we tried to present a wide range of topics discussed about polyglottery, and I hope that we succeeded. Thank you very much for your attention, everyone. I have lots of questions, but unfortunately, our time is out. Thank you. Hope to see you at other conferences and gatherings.
Well, thank you very much for the very interesting talks. I thoroughly enjoyed listening to them all, and I have learned a lot. I've got lots of questions, but there is no time. So, but I'm very motivated to read your work, and I'll do so. Thank you.
We can exchange questions by email, can't we? Because the emails are given in the book of proceedings, so we can find them and email each other.
The purpose of a meeting like this is to instigate, is to stimulate, and to make us know each other and share interests. So I think
thank you for the organizers of the conference.
Yes, it was a wonderful roundtable. Thank you for all. And very, very new very new ideas about how to teach multilingual in a multilingual setting.
Yes.
Very new.
Yeah. Very advanced work, very top line. I really enjoyed it.
So I hope it's not
So
something
thank you.
we can develop this into a broad direction, and maybe new researchers will desire to join us and will gladly, of course, share our data and research. So this is what we're hoping for.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. It was really, really interesting. I already made a question in the chat, but I think I will copy it and send it by email, because I really think we can exchange more ideas. But people from at the symposiums and regular sessions also want us to be there. So I invite you all to join the symposiums and regular sessions now, and we can keep talking by email, or even we can have a Google chat like this anytime in the future. So thank you very much. And I will just remind you that at 4:30 in the afternoon and 12:30 in Brazil. I'm just always keeping this in mind for myself. We will be together for the farewell ceremony. So you are all invited to join us again later in the afternoon. Okay?
Absolutely.
Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.